I know that whoever is watching this right now, who's watching the chat on the screen, is probably like, it is working though. It's totally fine. Well, that's because you're probably watching from YouTube or Twitch. If you're trying to watch from my personal site, I think we've still got some kinks to work out. So that's what I'm trying to fix here. It says the stream appears to be offline. So I'm trying to get that fixed. See right there? Now you can see it. That's what I'm talking about. What's up, everybody? How you doing? Don't worry, we're going to get this fixed in just a second here. In the meantime, you can watch it from YouTube or Twitch. Who's here? What's going on? Mr. Red, good to see you. Gina, hi, how's it going? Delusing Guitars, yeah, nice to see you. Elijah, Snow Rackley, hello. Being Cool is for Nerds dropped by, but has to go to work or something like that, and so we'll be back. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Not like I gave everybody a lot of notice. I was gonna do this stream a couple weeks ago, and then I didn't have an internet connection, and then I set up an internet connection, and then I was gonna do this last week, and then goats chewed through my Ethernet cord. Dead ass. The goats. Goats are fucking terrorists. They chewed through my Ethernet cord. Why were goats getting to my Ethernet cable, you ask? Well, that's a fantastic question. The basic answer to that is I live currently, temporarily, out on this farm, and I have two 150-foot cables connected to one another. So it's like, you know how you have an Ethernet cable, okay? And then I have like one of those, they call it female to female connectors, so I can run one Ethernet cable into another and extend it, so it's like a 300-foot cord. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. It's kind of nuts, but anyway, I ran that through a pasture to get to me. That's how far we. That's the extent to which I went to get the internet to where I am currently. 300 feet through a goat pasture. And then the goat chewed it in half. So it's crazy. I mean, it's what a life, you know. I never thought I'd say that, but now here I am. And the best part was I actually fixed it myself. I mean, using a DIY video on using a DIY video. Oh yeah, thanks, good workout, buddy. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, I used a DIY video to fix my my Ethernet cable. They showed me how to strip the wires and what to attach and stuff like that. I'm not sure if everybody can see that, but can you? It's just a picture of the wires that I stripped down, had to connect. It's very interesting stuff. God bless DIY videos on YouTube. I would be nothing without those. Even a lot of the work that I get paid to do, I just use DIY videos on YouTube whenever I don't know what I'm doing. All right. I'm going to go to manual embed /force, which is an option that I have here on YouTube, and then it'll work on my personal site. So how's everybody doing today? I'm going to talk about a lot of stuff that's been building up for a while, just because, you know, every day so much stuff happens, and you know, I'm always like, oh, I've got a new video essay that I want to do, or a new stream that I want to do, and then because it doesn't happen, because I'm not doing it, it's, you know, because I'm working so much, stuff keeps getting put off, and so it just keeps stacking up, you know. And so the title of the stream is I Got Scammed, Psychohistory, Tankies, Platypus, and Metamodernism. It's just stuff that's on my mind. So let's see. I think my website should probably start working in a second here. One of the lovely things for the folks arriving on Twitch is that if you ever are not able to see, or you've jumped in on the middle of a stream, I guess is what I'm trying to say, then you should be able to, through the YouTube or my personal website, go back to the beginning and then double speed to catch up, which is personally my favorite thing to do. And it's a little hard to follow everything when you're double speeding sometimes, but if you keep it up eventually it'll get to the point where you're triple speeding along and you'll be understanding everything and it'll be great. But not that you can triple speed on YouTube, you can't. But I've realized with the Pocket Note. Oh yeah, there we go. My website's working now. Woo! Yeah, so anyway, I've learned that well, now I know how to make this thing work. But yeah, I learned that I can actually understand some articles at 4 times speed. I think that makes me more of an accelerationist than most accelerationists. All right, so what's going on, chat? We got the on-street chat. Good workout, buddy. Yeah, Platypus is a wild group. A wild group. When I talk about them, I will talk about the things people say about them and then my personal experiences with them so far and why I find value in that specific tendency, if you would want to call it a tendency. When we get to psychohistory, I'll talk about why I dived into it, what I've been learning from it. I will talk about what I like about it and some of my critiques of it. It's fascinating stuff. Metamodernism, I'm not going to spend as long on, except to just say, like, you know, this is all just stuff that I want to talk about because it's stuff I've been researching. So, let's talk about how I got scammed first. Bad Brain's not a fan of Platypus. Well, that's fine. So, oh, Mechanistasia, good to see ya. Welcome to the YouTube. Yeah. Fucking goats. Hey there, Anarchist Tech Support. Good to see you. So, the scam topic is one of those ones that I have to be kind of careful about because I still work at this place and I don't want to. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I'm going to speak about it very vaguely. I'm going to say that I basically found out that what it looks like is happening is we, the employees, are being lied to and put in harm's way. Not physical harm, but legal harm, where we could potentially be incurring misdemeanors and big fines. Now, some of this is slightly debatable still. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of it, and so I can't go too into detail. But let's just say that I, reached out to the Department of Labor and the Industrial Commission in the state, as well as, I tried to get a hold of people at the ACLU, and finally I talked to the Attorney General's office. And it doesn't really matter if the particulars of my personal case are indeed what I'm characterizing them as. Do you follow? Like, it doesn't really matter, like, the particulars of my case. The fact is that when I went to the Department of Labor, when I went to the Attorney General's office, when I went to the Industrial Commission, if I'm telling them, hey, I'm a worker, we're being told that something we're doing that we have to do is not illegal, but it is illegal, and I'm worried about that. I would expect is, oh, okay, well, we've got a person for that. Instead, what I got was, oh, you want to go to this other department. So people kept referring me back to the Department of Labor, but I'd already talked to the people at the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor was like, well, the Human Rights Commission deals with discrimination, and OSHA deals with physical safety issues. And we deal with unemployment and whether people are getting shorted on their wages. And I'm like, okay, so no one deals with if an employer is lying to their employees and putting them in legal harm's way. No. And basically all three of these places that I talked to were basically like, well, maybe you should just get a different job. And I was like, well, I can, sure. I mean, let's just say that I can find another job that pays this well or whatever. Aren't you worried about the fact that they're doing this? Aren't you worried about the fact that other people will continue getting hired here being led on under false pretenses, and being put in harm's way for potential misdemeanors and fines, which with these people I'd said, I already have like 5 names of people in the past who have gotten fines or whatever. And so, and that, like, yeah, it's just not our department. Okay, so whose department is it? That's the kind of ring around that I was getting yesterday. Spent many hours getting tossed between departments like a hot potato. And eventually, the person at the Attorney General's office was like, you know, after saying that I should get another job or whatever and all this stuff, goes, check this out. She says, she says that I should get another job, and I say, oh yeah, well, are you hiring? It sounds like you should hire somebody for a position that would deal with when a company is routinely putting its employees in harm's way and lying to them about what they're doing being legal when it's not. And she was like, okay, well, yeah, we have our eye on everything. That's what she said. She's like, yeah, we have our eye on everything. And I was like me? And she goes, give me a minute. And then she actually transfers me to like one of their attorneys. And I had to walk through the whole thing all over again. She pulls the same bullshit about maybe I should get a different job. And this is my favorite part. So from a political philosophy standpoint, we get to this, like, I'm utterly exasperated. I was like, isn't the justification of the state, like, and by the way, when I say the justification of the state, I don't mean like what the state actually is or what it actually means to do. I just mean that when people do state theory, it tends to be that the state's justification, whether we're talking about Hobbes, Locke, Rousseau, whatever, the state's self-justification is to be a third-party mediator when entities are in conflict, right? Like, oh, the consumer and the producer, someone's getting scammed, someone's robbing somebody. The employee and the employer, someone's robbing somebody, right? Well, shouldn't there be? Yeah, that's the justification of the state, is a third party to adjudicate such in case of such conflicts. This is the basis of law. I mean, generally speaking, right? And she says, there is no such entity. That's the punchline. That's the punchline. There is no such entity. Okay. I mean, I know plenty of Marxists and anarchists who would agree with you on that one. But I thought, like, your own internal, like, or self-justification sort of rationalization, like, that you use is no. To her, as like an attorney who works for the state's Attorney General's office, there's only laws. There are laws that deal with specific things, and if what you're talking about is not something that is being dealt with by any existing laws, it basically just falls through the cracks and there's no one to turn to. There's no such thing as law, there's only laws. There's no such thing as the state, there's only states. It's very, very strange. Like, I was trying to make sense of it. I was like, she must be like a delusion. Welcome to America, indeed. Hilarious. Anyway, so that's one scam. I also got scammed 2 other times this year. And I just want to, like, alert you all to the existence of scams, since I keep running into them. I consider myself, somewhat critical or whatever, but when I talk about this, I'm going to sound like a bumbling, like an absent-minded professor, like a complete, someone whose head is just always like somewhere else in the real world, and so they just keep running into like, duh, how did you not see that coming kind of problems. Fine, talk all the shit you want, but I actually put myself on Craigslist to do odd jobs, which is something I always do. I've gotten lots of like landscaping work and handyman stuff like that before, that's fine. But you know, I put myself like on Craigslist probably back in like February or March, and I actually got an email from someone saying, you know, I do real estate here, and I'm way too busy to post the listings, and so if you will post the listings to Facebook, then I'll pay you like $450 for like every 6 that you post. And I was like, and you'll get paid once a week. You know, it's not taxed. It's going to be like under the table or whatever. And I was just like, wow, this person came across like a boomer. I'd show you the emails right now, but I don't want to go to all the trouble of like blocking out my own personal email and all that. So I'm just not going to show you. But it was very like convincing. I showed some other people. They were like, wow, that's a great deal. So, I mean, what could go wrong? So the person basically sends me, you know, the address, the photos, you know, the basic stuff to post to Facebook, and then I'd post it in the marketplace. And then if people messaged, look, you know, interested in renting at these houses, then I would just give them the email address to reach out to. And the email address was just the name of the homeowner. And each, you know, and so, or the landlord or whatever. And I did this for about a day before I thought, wow, these are really cheap rentals. This is a really great deal. I'm talking like luxurious spaces, you know, beautiful houses, you know, garage, you know, you got a 2-car garage with like parking out front, and, you know, it's like a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, or 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, that kind of stuff. And it's like $800 or $900 a month. And I'm like, that seems unrealistic. So I looked up the address online, and I actually found the same listing on Zillow, which is a real estate website. So I looked up Zillow, and it's like, okay, so all of these listings are already on Zillow, and they're all under the names of the emails that I'm forwarding people to. But I understand how easy it is to generate a fake Gmail account with whatever name you want. And so all of a sudden I'm like, okay, this is probably a scam. So I looked it up, and indeed it's a scam. So this basically how this scam works is you tell people to post for you on the marketplace, and they'll do it until they get banned by the marketplace. And in the meantime, the way the scam works is those people who want to see the rental usually aren't in state or able to get over and see it like immediately. And they're usually desperate because we're in the middle of a recession and times are crazy. And so the scam artist basically just says, hey, you know, pay the first and last months and you're in. You know, we'll close it out so no one else is going to try to get in there. But this listing is literally just some real estate like listing taken off of a website like Zillow. So does everyone follow? Does that make sense how this scam works? I hope I'm not making it too confusing. I hope that this all makes sense. So yeah, I was basically I was duped. I was a part of that one for about a day before I realized what I was doing, and then I was like, oh, I'm such an idiot. And so I stopped, obviously, and I sent messages to all of those people and said, I hope you do not give this person any money. It's a total scam. Do not fall for it. Facebook still banned me from the marketplace, and I actually sent them 3 appeals. And on the 3rd appeal, I gave them more of an explanation about how I'd gotten scammed or duped into the scam, and they reversed it. They let me back to the marketplace. So that's cool. That's the second scam. So I'm going. I actually. So we started this conversation with like this job that is lying to its employees and putting us in harm's way, and how there is no department for that, and like everybody was saying ridiculous stuff like get another job, to then just being like there is no such entity to mediate disputes. It's like, what? And then so that's the first one. The second one I gave here was the first in chronological order this year. The third one that I'm about to give, I'm jumping all over the place, but this next one, it was the one that happened when I moved just like a month and a half, 2 months ago And I moved back to my home state, and I have this very expensive laptop that I'd used student loans to buy. And the reason I had bought a very expensive laptop, a Surface Book 2, was because I was stupid. I actually believed, because I didn't know anything about tech, that its specs would allow it to edit videos. And I thought, if I have like this really good laptop, then I won't need a desktop computer, and then I'll be able to edit videos anywhere I go. And if I want to do, videos seriously, then here you go. But it turns out video is just not, you shouldn't be doing that on a laptop. And the really high specs on a laptop don't speak for very much, because it will inevitably overheat if you're doing a big video project. And so indeed it would crash and slow down and be a huge pain in the butt when I was trying to edit videos. And then I think I was talking about it on a live stream about this problem I was running into, and someone was like, well, yeah, that was stupid of you. And I was like, what an asshole. But it turns out that asshole was just speaking truth. It was actually pretty stupid of me to think that that expensive laptop would actually do the trick. But, that's how they get you. And so anyway, I moved and I have this laptop, but its charging port had not been working. And it was not because of the charger itself. It was because of the where you plug in on the laptop was going out. And so I took it to the Geek Squad, because I had actually, when I'd bought it, I'd paid for a couple of years like hardware protection plan or whatever. And so with the protection plan, they actually said, well, we can either send it back to Microsoft, and it's going to take a few months to get it fixed, but also just because of COVID and how it's backing everything up, we'll just speed this up and just give we will offer you just the entire reimbursement of what you paid for this laptop. And because I was not happy with that laptop, I was like, hell yeah, that's really exciting. I definitely want to do that. Well, so I got reimbursed onto gift cards. This is over $2,000 on gift cards. The gift cards that I should be able to sell to anyone, they say. Okay. So, I posted one of these on Craigslist. That was my first mistake. And there was a couple of inquiries, and one person was pretty serious, and that person was going to meet me in town. And so we were driving to meet this person, and then that person texted and said, hey, I actually found out that my friend had gotten ripped off on a gift card scam. And so I just want to make sure that these gift cards are legit. I say these because the person had originally called about the one gift card, and I told them I actually have two, and I'll give you both at a discounted price, because I just wanted the money immediately so I could buy a car, because I just moved back and I needed a car. And so I was like, right on. This is a fast way to get some money. Cool. And the person was totally down. But now they wanted some kind of proof that the money was on the cards. And so for future reference, I should have gone with this person's first suggestion. The person said, I said, well, how should we do that? And the person said, well, we could either meet at Best Buy, or you could call the number on the back and put me on a three-way, and that way I could hear the balance. And so my partner Ann and I were both like, I had this person on speakerphone, and we were just like, oh yeah, let's do the three-way. So we three-way called the number on the back, and we input the number for the card into the automated system. And you know how like when you click buttons, it goes beep, 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 as you type. Well, I thought, okay, so that would be bad. Maybe that person would be, maybe that could be like some kind of a scam. If it beeps, the person might actually know. But the thing is these cards, when you're verifying them, it actually doesn't beep. And so we're doing it, and it's like all silent, and I'm like, I feel safe with that. That's where I went wrong. It turns out it's actually it turns out that this person who is actually scamming us from California was they have software that they were using that allowed them to decode the silent input to Best Buy, where we were trying to find out our balance. And so anyway, we didn't realize this just yet. So we get off the phone and we expect the person to show up. They never show up. Then they say that they had to like stop at their friend's house to help their friend with something, and they're so sorry, and they're still going to come. And they jerked us around for a while, and then we realized, well, we started thinking that we were getting trolled, and so we just gave up on them. And we never assumed this person was scamming us. We just assumed this person was either trolling us, wasting our time, or that they were just like a person who could not get their ducks in a row, could not get organized, could not understand time, we thought. Well, it turns out the next morning I wake up at like 6 a.m. and I just like had like this feeling of like, what if I got scammed? So I went and I called the number to check the balance of the cards, and both of the balances were at zero. I had all of the money was gone. So that one was that was a lot of money to disappear really fast. And I'd gone from being like, wow, I have to work so hard to make money to get a car, to being like, oh wow, this useless piece of shit laptop is actually, I can just cash it out and buy a car, to then being like, oh, now I don't have any of that money or that shitty laptop. Yeah, that was a lot. Hey there. Good to see you all. Yeah, so I'm just talking about the 3 scams that happened. So in a half hour's time, now you all know. Yeah, it sucked. Hey there, Social Song. Good to see you. I'm going to look at the chat here on the screen. I'm able to peek in on the Restream chat every once in a while, which shows me the YouTube and Twitch chat so far. But be advised, if the chat I look at the most is the one that's on screen, which you can join at theoryplebe.com/live. If anybody's joining late and wants to hear my account of the 3 scams this year that I've been duped by, go ahead and just go back and then fast forward. You can double time on YouTube or from my personal site. Yeah, good workout, buddy. That is sophisticated. I mean, right? To be able to decode the silence, I don't know how to do that. Like, geez, I guess it makes sense though, right? So think about it. The person probably used a Google Voice number. If they used a Google Voice number to call me, that means that their computer side is able to like record the phone call. And if Best Buy has software that can decode silent input on the touchpad, then I imagine that person was able to figure out how to get their hands on that same kind of software. So yeah, so now I have a shitty car. Oh, and that was another kind of scam. My brother-in-law vouched for this mechanic who I drove 2 hours to buy a car from. Actually, I was driving to buy a truck from that mechanic, and this is after working for like a couple weeks to earn the money to buy the car or the truck. I drive to get the truck. The truck had actually been robbed, apparently. Like pieces had been taken out of the truck, so it no longer functioned, and the guy was like upset about it. And so he's like, well, I have this car, and I'll sell it to you for $1,000. And it looked like a piece of crap, and I drove it around, and I was like, it's like an old Honda Accord, and I was like, it gets me from A to B, but the door doesn't even open from the inside, and it has a bit of a wobble when I try to brake. And he's like, well, those are just basic, kind of, he's like, the main thing was it had an issue with the starter, and I fixed that. But if I were to fix everything in it, I'd be selling it for $2,000 instead of $1,000. So that's the price that I'm selling it for. I'd already driven for 2 hours. My brother-in-law vouched by this guy, so I said, all right, I'll get it. So I bought it, drove it back home, and used it for about a week before the starter went out on it. So the starter breaks on it. I had to get AAA and then get it towed and then get the starter fixed. And I borrowed money from somebody to do that. I still haven't paid that person back the money that I borrowed from them. Long story short, it had an oil leak. It had this wobble issue, and the door wouldn't open from the inside, so I'd have to climb out the passenger side. That's how much of a piece of crap this car was. And when I told my brother-in-law that, he was upset and talked to the mechanic, and he basically said that the mechanic had said that he had looked it over, and he hadn't actually looked it over, and that the guy was willing, he wanted to kind of salvage his reputation with my brother-in-law, because my brother-in-law is brings him lots of business in that town, and it's a small town, so word gets around. So to salvage his reputation, this guy was going to give it the look over and basic repairs that were necessary to actually make it worth what he had sold it to me for, because I'd had 3 separate people who didn't know each other in 3 separate conversations. When I told them the basic issues, they were all like, yo, you got sold a $500 car for $1,000. And I was like, oh my God. And then one person, the guy who initially looked at the starter and diagnosed it for me, he's like, you got sold a $400 car. So it's like, okay, I got a $400 car, 3 people saying $500 car. I told my brother-in-law that. My brother-in-law was like, I'll talk to him. And then, so anyway, I drove back out there again, taking another couple days off work. And so that's like opportunity cost right there. And anyway, the guy fixed most of those problems. And so it's working for now, but without it being someone that my brother-in-law was like, knows and has to continue kind of living around and all that, it could have been way worse, because the oil leak, I would have never got that fixed. Woo! It's been wild. Oh, thank you, Good Workout Buddy, for the tier 4 subscription. Yeah, I'm kind of like, some people pay for like the subscription, and then the subscription doesn't automatically renew. And so some people who were patrons for like a year are no longer subscribers, even. Like, they went to my personal website to do the subscription thing, but then because it doesn't automatically renew like Patreon, now they're just like not giving me money, which is fine. But also kind of a flaw, I think, maybe with this setup. I don't really want to be reliant on Patreon, but at the same time with my personal site, I'm gonna have to figure that out, because obviously, like, people shouldn't have to constantly come back in and resubscribe. That's just a bad model. But yeah, so Delosing Guitars says, I fucking hate cars. I understand computers more than cars, so I need to set up a bartering system with someone. Yeah, Delosing Guitars. I actually got ripped off on a computer on Craigslist like 10 years ago. I was getting into gaming for a little bit. It was actually a funny story. This was a phase of life when I was trying to get away from some bad influences, people I'd been hanging out with too much, who I figured I was going to get in trouble if I kept hanging out with those people, and I didn't really know what else to do with my time. And so I decided to play World of Warcraft for the better part of a year. Not exactly a year, but I knew that if I played that game, it would definitely help me, focus elsewhere for a while, and it definitely worked. It was a lot of fun. But so my roommate and I, we both like went and got good computers for that. Well, or we thought. So we tried to buy this computer that was supposed to have like, basically the specs were wildly exaggerated. So we bought this computer that looked really cool, but actually had the simpest of insides. So like the person told us it was like a quad core, but it was like a single core. That kind of crap. And we just got ripped off majorly, because we met with that person at a public place to do the whole transaction. We actually didn't know where the person lived, so we couldn't really do anything about it. So look out for Craigslist. Like, I've met a lot of great people on Craigslist. I've sold a lot of things on Craigslist. I've had some great clients through Craigslist, but at the same time, there are some real scams. You got to really look out. So if you're talking about cars, talking about computers, talking about gift cards, try to make sure that you look into the kinds of scams that are popular. Just look it up. Just Google or search in any other way, like the words, Craigslist, scam, computer, car, gift cards, whatever. That's my big lesson. That's my big takeaway. And I think that the scams, that there are more people gunning for you and trying to rip you off in the midst of an economic recession, because there's more people who are desperate. And desperate times call for desperate measures. People who are fucked up, who have had it rough, who are desperate, can often fall into bad habits of reproducing the very kinds of trauma that have put them in the place that they're in the first place. And so it's something to be looking out for. Yeah. So now we've talked about scams. Right on. 24 people watching on YouTube. Is anyone watching on Twitch? I'm not on there right now, so you'll just all have to tell me if there is anyone on there. Good Workout Buddy says, I didn't check the box last time. There is an option. Oh, there is an option for recurring payments. Oh, cool. So folks, I think the way to do that is theoryplebe.com/donate. I feel weird though getting money from people now because I am not really doing nearly as much with video as I was back in the day. But the people who are patrons or subscribers do like make me actually think more about doing these streams or, you know, doing stuff at all, because, you know, I know it's like a sort of reminder. I sort of feel like the need, oh, I got to do something, you know. And one of the big things that is the background, I guess, on this stream, now that we're about to get into the stuff on all of the other things that are in the title, Psychohistory and Platypus Affiliated Society and Metamodernism and Tankies. Now, one of the things that I want to say before we get into all of that is that each of those topics, I've wanted to do multiple video essays on each of them. So I've wanted to do a couple of video essays about Platypus. I've wanted to do a few video essays on Tankies, the Tanky tendency, blah, blah, blah. I wanted to do a few videos on Marx versus traditional Marxism. I wanted to do video essays about all these things that I want to do video essays about. But video essays are a lot more work than just turning on a stream and talking. And but the thing is turning on a stream and talking is not easy anyway. It takes a lot of setup. You do have to prepare, and the energy that I put into this time spent streaming, actually, it's kind of like a zero-sum game. That energy, putting that effort into the streaming, always sort of detracts from my ability that for the next couple of days to focus on my book and writing it. And I wish it did not work this way, but it's because I have so little attention in a week that is, you know, beyond or left over after my work week. You know, so I spend a lot of time working, and the work I do it's emotionally draining, it's physically exhausting, and so you know, I've got to focus most of my energy on the book because I'm trying to get that thing done before December is over. That's so back in 2019, December 2019, I did a fundraiser to help me move at the time, and I said that I would write my first shitty book and get that PDF to people, and that would be my sort of gift back in return for the donation. So I'm taking that very seriously. I've been taking that very seriously all year. The books that I've been reading, the literature review, there's so many things that I want to talk about that I don't feel confident to talk about. Then I dig in deeper and deeper and realize there's more and more. And it's sort of like this endless sort of research spiral. And I think a lot of people probably know what that's like. But as I go, I keep finding out about new resources and books that are absolutely irreplaceable that I wish I'd found like 6 months or 6 years ago. And so that's some of the stuff I'll be talking about. I think that Psychohistory, Metamodernism, Platypus Affiliated Society are all like really useful resources or make important contributions in their own ways. I know that Bad Brain said, oh, I don't like Platypus. Well, there's some pretty cool people there. There's a lot of different kinds of people there, a lot of different kinds of tendencies represented there. But I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So I think what I'm going to do right now, though, is I'm going to take a short break. I'm talking like 2 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute, 2 minute break. And in that time, I'm just going to play something. What am I going to play? I just need to run and grab something really quick. So I think, you know what? Okay. I know exactly what I'm going to do. You know how I've been doing this robot reader voice and some people really don't like it. Well, if you don't like it, that's fine. I totally understand why you would not like it. But I also want you to understand that if your brain kind of shuts down when you hear reading and there's words that you don't understand or you're feeling left behind in terms of comprehension, stop, like just loosen up. let go of your sort of let go of that need to understand everything immediately. Realize that you can always come back to it later. Realize that you will get more out of it than you thought you would get out of it. My reading comprehension and like it really increased after I kind of became desensitized or immune to what I used to think that the robot voice was annoying. And now I just love these apps, and I actually prefer the robot reader over real narrators. So on Audible, you have professional narrators. On LibriVox, you have sort of independent, free, usually more amateur narrators. So the quality might be a little lesser there. But in both of those cases, the way the person's voice sounds, their inflection, their personality kind of comes through a little bit, and kind of it kind of shapes the text that they're reading in a way that I prefer a robot, just because the robot is neutral, and the robot might butcher some words, it might use wrong inflection sometimes, but I'm not going to be sitting there reading into it like, why did the robot read it that way? I know why the robot read it that way. The robot just does. It's a robot. I don't have to worry about it. It's less distracting because I don't read into it as much. And so after I got over that hurdle, I've found that my reading comprehension went up a lot over this year because of COVID and being put out of work for a while there. I listened to books that I couldn't really understand. And the more I did it, eventually it just started to make sense. And I started to go back and listen over things again. And then I realized, like, wow, the stuff that they say about a really good book, about how if it's good, it's worth revisiting, and you've never truly read a book until you've read it 3 times. The first time to get the lay of the land, the second time to really like try to like understand it, and the third time to run it up against everything else like critically. That's all true with listening. Maybe you have to listen 5 times instead of 3. But basically, yeah, letting go of my own personal linear sort of schooled habits of thinking that I have to get it all on the first go, feeling like I never have time. I realized that a sort of axiom I operate with now is that we don't have time to act like we don't have time. We definitely don't have time, but we definitely don't have time to act like we don't have time, right? Because that's a total waste of time. There's nothing more immature or characteristic of immaturity than a lifestyle of acting as though you never have time to plan anything. So, and we'll talk a little bit more about maturity and how that factors into everything else we'll be talking about here in a little bit. Now I got to see if I can pull up. Hey, Ellie, good to see you. Losing Guitars. Everyone make sure to hop into the on-screen chat, theoryofbelief.com/life if you want to be in on this. I'm going to go to this screen. Uh-oh. No, I'm not going to go to that screen. I lied. I don't want to have to fuss with it. I'm just going to take this. And I'm going to say that I've got a really big content warning. Okay, folks, this is a big content warning. If you don't want to hear what's about to happen, this is basically a little bit of a takeaway on my studies researching psychohistory. Psychohistory has to do with all of the darkest skeletons in the human closet. Cross-culturally, Lloyd DeMoss, who's the founder of psychohistory, basically says, you know, anthropologists and historians have failed to seriously factor in the way that child abuse and trauma impacts a society, and how poor child rearing practices, or how treating babies like little animals instead of like, you know, developing persons, can really characterize a society and kind of damn it to reproducing violence and stuff like that on a larger scale. And so some people will, you know, want to take a, you know, if your life is so full of trauma and this is too, you know, too much, do come back in a little bit after you see that the robot reader is done, after you see that I'm back. Otherwise, please do, like, if it's just like grit your teeth and rough it out, then I do encourage you to do that, because I think that this stuff, I think that there's 2 versions of history that are typically taught in the United States. One is the triumphalist, we're the heroes of the world, and the other one is the nativist people based, people's history, that's the one that the left, especially since the new left, has usually relied on. Both are distortions. Every interpretation is its own distortion. They all are able to show you certain things that the other ones aren't. And sometimes, and there are certain kind of assumptions and modes, mindsets and stuff that just makes it so that the historian dedicated to a specific tradition there isn't going to see certain things that people coming from some other perspective are going to see. And so from a philosophical standpoint, epistemology of history, like how do we know stuff about history? That's always been a serious problem for me, especially when I'm surrounded by people who are, kind of warring tendencies in left on the left or whatever. They all have like their sort of ideologically motivated reasons for thinking that this or that account about history is true or false. And so, I'm just like, how do we sort through all of that? How do we kind of get a better, more true historical understanding? That's always been something that I'm like thinking a lot about. But what Lloyd deMause, the person who we're about to hear a couple of excerpts from, it's very short, it's not going to take very long, but what he does is his approach is to say that anthropologists, ethnologists, and historians have tended to ignore the life of children in societies throughout history and in other cultures or our own, and to assume that to kind of assume cultural relativism, or and try to use that as like, oh, we're being objective about things, and as a kind of result of that, to sort of whitewash or gloss over things in ways that are pretty impressive, going so far as to say that children are, and triumphalism and exceptionalism are the same thing. Yes, to losing guitars. So, but basically to kind of, it goes so far as to say that, a society where children, it's normal for a child to have had to eat his or her siblings, because of a ritual or whatever. It's normal to say that that would not mess that child up, and that child could be totally healthy. That's or you have like these anthropologists from like the 1800s who were like Marxists, who would oh, everyone was great in this society, everyone's happy and sexually unrepressed, and in the meantime you've got little girls who are committing suicide because they are being ritually raped. So like I said, it gets dark here. What I just brought up, that last example, is not actually in here. The examples we're going to have here, one is more of like it's about these Western anthropologists and their approach to Aborigines, and then the last half of it, the other excerpt is like it's about the horrific child rearing practices in Europe, I believe in the 18th century. And I'll talk a little bit more about why I'm critical of Lloyd deMause, but it's probably not the reasons that you would think or that you might initially be critical. So anyway, I just welcome you to watch with an open mind, and I'll talk more about why I think this is important afterwards. But like I said, I'm about to step away. So here I go, and enjoy, y'all. It's kind of weird to say enjoy, but
What follows is grisly/gruesome/dark but really important for anyone who likes to paint rosy pictures of the past either in the West. What follows is grisly/gruesome/dark but really important for anyone who likes to paint rosy pictures of the past either in the West, the East, or in indigenous societies in general, a kind of generalizing in each of those cases that is wrong-headed, no doubt. I have pretty strong criticisms of deMause, which mostly relate to his depth psychology background methods. But the stuff he has compiled on how anthropologists, ethnologists use cultural relativism to excuse or whitewash how children are often treated is eye-opening, to say the least. Whether or not if I think his depth psychology stuff goes too far into speculation with its reaches to interpret imagery. I think the basic hunch that childhood trauma produces fucked up adults and societies is pretty obvious and an important approach to history and anthropology that rarely gets dealt with head-on by timid scholars. I discovered I simply could make no sense at all of what Raham and other anthropologists ethnologists were saying. This was particularly true about childhood. Raham wrote, for instance, that the Australian Aborigines he observed were excellent parents, even though they ate every other child, out of what they called baby hunger, and forced their other children to eat parts of their siblings. This doesn't seem to have affected the personality development of the surviving children, Raham said, and in fact, he concluded, these were really good mothers who eat their own children. 6. Doubtful that eating your sibling could fail to be traumatic, I began to question the rest of Raham's happy Aboriginal childhood thesis. I turned to the publications of other ethnographers, and found little help, other than a confirmation of the cannibalism of Australian infants. It was only when I began publishing a new scholarly journal, the Journal of Psychological Anthropology, and was able to publish psychoanthropologist Arthur Hippler's first-hand observations of an Australian Aborigine tribe, that I learned what Raham had left out. Infant care in the past was essentially rigorous and presently is inconsistent, occasionally to the point of near absolute neglect. We have striven to find a non-ethnocentric way of describing this phenomenon, but, according even to local values, the earliest mothering patterns are seen as neglectful. There seems no other way to describe them. Children of early age are carried, head supported, astraddle their mothers, or other carriers, hip. By 6 weeks, the infant receives the first of the recurrent attacks on him by siblings. Attacks by his siblings upon the Angu infant seem nearly unceasing. The mother rarely intervenes. Children's attacks become so common that one often hears adults saying, "Don't kill the baby." But no one interferes, and the child is increasingly made subject to violence and stress. The same events which we describe as neglectful have been described by others, Raham 1932, as tolerant, non-intrusive or permissive. In our personal observation, and consistent with Hamilton, children are abused by mother and others when they cry. They are shouted at, jerked roughly, slapped or shaken. The care of children under 6 months of age can be described as hostile, aggressive, and careless. It is often routinely brutal. Infanticide was often practiced. The baby is offered the breast often when he does not wish it and is nearly choked with milk. The mother is often substantially verbally abusive to the child as he gets older, using epithets such as "you shit," "vagina to you." Care is expressed through shouts, or not at all, when it is not accompanied by slaps and threats. I never observed a single adult Yangu caretaker of any age or sex walking a toddler around, showing him the world, explaining things to him and empathizing with his needs. While categorical statements are most risky, I am most certain of this: the world is described to the child as dangerous and hostile, full of demons. Though in reality the real dangers are from his caretakers. The child is sexually stimulated by the mother at this age as well. Penis and vagina are caressed to pacify the child, and clearly the action arouses the mother. Many mothers develop blissful smiles or become quite agitated, with, we assume, sexual stimulation, and their nipples apparently harden during these events. Children are encouraged to play with their mother's breasts, and boys are obviously stimulated sexually. Threats of abandonment, ghouls, and monsters are used to control the child. Children become passive and dependent and, until nearly age 2, are terrified to leave the presence of their mothers. Mothers encourage this anxiety by telling the child that all the world is dangerous away from them. Intersexual play occurs, pelvic thrusting and lying on one another as well as genital manipulation are common. 7. Lest anyone think Damas is actually Eurocentric to the extent that he is uncritical about child rearing in Europe, here's an excerpt from a little further down in this article. In 18th century Europe, the manner of parents and society toward children was typified by two opposing attitudes. One, which can be characterized as an attitude of essential indifference, consisted by minimal contact with children and a modicum of concern about them. At the other end were intrusive parents, who at their most extreme determined to totally mold and supervise their children. 56, the former she found most in the upper classes, the latter in the middle classes. Alenka Puhar, working from extensive Yugoslav personal, medical and folk material, pictured the twilight world of evil spirits which surrounded the child. leading parents to subject them to continuous assaults to protect them from witches, devils, and incubi. 57. From birth on, the infant was kept tightly bound, filthy, mangy. They threw live coals 3 times over the bewitched child, one who cried too much, and put sharp objects into the cradle, knives, needles, forks, nails, and so on, to protect against incubi. These objects were some swaddling clothes. In many places the child's nipples were smeared with excrement. Children could be saved from demons if they were held by one foot, upside down, over an open fire. Bedwetting was especially disturbing for parents, who often slept in the same bed as their children. Ritual beating was used. Children were also made to drink their own urine. It was enough for a child to be scabby for it to be sat on the peel baker's shovel and pushed into the hot oven for a moment. We can infer that it was really hot from the fact that this was practiced at bread baking time, or, rather, at the moment when the baked loaves were pulled out of the oven. From Koroska comes the custom of popping a newborn child into the oven for a moment if it had been born with an old face. Very close to the idea if putting the newborn child into the oven was the practice of holding it above the open fireplace or over boiling water. Or pouring iron water, that is, the water in which a blacksmith coals hot iron, over it. Modern wrote of iron water treatment that the patient suffered great pain. For a whole chapter on how Germans were raising their babies at the time of Hitler's childhood, you'll want to read The Origins of War in Child Abuse. Or the shorter article The Childhood Origins of the Holocaust. I also recommend The Universality of Incest, one of his better known articles, as well as his books The History of Childhood and The Emotional Life of Nations. The long and short of it is that the further you go back in history, the worst babies are treated. Abhorrent child-rearing practices are still prevalent in every society on this planet, and no country gets off the hook or whatever. Demoz is basically the guy who spent his whole life unearthing skeletons from every culture's closet that politically correct or wannabe.
This last part is me. I wrote this last part. So for those who weren't paying attention to the on-screen, the part where it says, the part where it gets into, for a whole chapter on how Germans were raising their babies at the time of Hitler's childhood, you'll want to read The Origins of War and Child Abuse. I think it's like chapter 4 in that book, or the shorter article, The Childhood Origins of the Holocaust, which is freely available on their website. I also recommend The Universality of Incest, one of the better known articles, as well as his books, The History of Childhood and The Emotional Life of Nations. Now, The History of Childhood is one of his more, that's his first kind of groundbreaking book. The Emotional Life of Nations was like the next really big work, and The Origins of War and Child Abuse was like kind of the follow-up. And so my issue with Demoz is generally that he is kind of too Jungian for my taste. I think that people who are too steeped in Jung, Carl Jung, often they kind of they go too far with like interpreting imagery and kind of like speculating about what it means. So this is a made up example, but like if you were like, wow, have you ever seen what a uterus looks like? It looks like a deer with antlers. You ever wonder why real men have to prove their manhood by killing deer and putting their heads on walls? Well, it's because it looks like a uterus and they have like a problem with their mother or something. Like that kind of speculation is something that I just like can't take very seriously. And sometimes I don't even know if it's being fair at all to Demoz, but sometimes like with his psychology shit, it seems like he's going out on that kind of a speculative reach. But at the same time, that I could write off entirely his depth psychology background, and it doesn't really change what he's been able to compile and the arguments that he's ended up having with mainstream academics, historians, ethnologists, anthropologists, who say that one can be properly adapted, that they try to use cultural relativism to hand wave away incest and pedophilia and child abuse. Like they'll try to like, if this is a basic pedophilia apologia, people try to pull the whole, if you weren't raised to think it's fucked up, then it's not fucked up. And it's like, well, you're not really taking the side of the children in these societies who throughout every human culture, because they are being subjected to this treatment, kill themselves. And just because most of the children don't kill themselves doesn't mean they don't grow to be fucked up. And I think that most people who are not mainstream or don't really fit into the mainstream probably have some experience of dysfunction in their upbringing. I come from a family that had certain child rearing practices that would definitely be interpreted by some people, probably also this guy DeMoss, as abusive. Daily spankings, multiple spankings. Spare the rod, spoil the child kind of child rearing can produce a pretty fucked up household, and a whole society that has fucked up child rearing practices can produce more fucked up kind of society-wide pathologies. At least that's what he is arguing. And as was being said in the chat by, let me double check to see who is saying it. Who is saying, oh, Good Workout Buddy was talking about how this kind of childhood trauma, this early childhood trauma is consistent with the pathological categorization of extreme mental health issues in the U.S., like borderline and narcissistic personality disorders. Yes. And I do think that in a lot of cases, those kinds of disorders can be rooted in pretty extreme, pretty fucked up, houses and upbringings, and parents who are taking their own trauma out on their children, and that poverty can really add into this, but that it's not isolated to the lowest of classes. This is he gets into class a lot more in these books and talks about how in a lot of these societies, it's often like middle and upper class families are the ones that are sending their kids off to wet nurses, which it's basically like that was you sending your child off to be killed. Basically, like a lot of times these wet nurses would either neglect them to the point where they died, or would actually kill them. The whole thing about we were really focusing on two examples that he uses to talk about things in this one article called, God, what's the article's name? I'm gonna have to pull that up really quick here. But because both the quotes that we were just listening to are from a specific article, and I'm going to share that in the chats so that you have access to that later. But I do recommend, if you don't have a lot of time, his short article on the Holocaust. I think it's like the origins of the Holocaust in childhood, in child abuse or something like that. And I don't believe that his interpretation of history is the only one, or that it's, it's the whole picture. But I do think that it's a perspective that gets not looked at enough, not thought about, not taken seriously enough. And I don't have a sort of bottom up perspective on history where it's like, oh, all of the bad things in society are coming from poor child rearing. No, I think that's a stupid sort of reduction. But it's important to, when you do a structural or systemic critique of society, to bear in mind that those first few formative years in our development characterize much of the stuff that we're going to be sorting out for the rest of our lives, and that a culture's or society's beliefs about babies and how to raise them can really reproduce a lot of trauma. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull up right here for you all the actual website that I got that from. So someone asked about it in the chat. Well, this is, I think you must have come in at after I'd already introduced what we were reading. So this article is called On Writing Childhood History. It's his critique. It's Lloyd DeMoss's critique of all of these other historians and stuff who try to use relativism to kind of romanticize and paint this rosy picture of different societies and of the past, which he does kind of the opposite. He goes into all societies throughout all history and compiles sort of like the stuff that these timid scholars are typically leaving out. And so I will go ahead and share this with you all. This is more of a justification of his approach to writing history and a critique of other people who write history about childhood. And he is showing how this sort of like people trying so hard to not be judgmental in their approach to history has led to people basically letting like pretty extreme atrocities like go either unmentioned or basically doing, like I was saying, sort of incest or pedophilia, like apologia in the process. Silent Mandible says, "Plebe, I'm doing the fast playback to catch up and you sound like Ben Shapiro." I'm sorry. That's terrible. So yeah. Anyway, so that's psychohistory. And the reason that I've been studying psychohistory is because my book deals with a concept called psychological gerrymandering. And it's, you know, it's not the best name for what I'm trying to get at by the term, but I can't come up with a better name yet. And I'm not going to get too in depth in this stream right now about what that means, except to say that, like, in explaining it to somebody, they said, wow, it sounds like you need to read psychohistory. And so I actually started looking into it, and I was like, oh my God, this is actually, I don't know if it's as related to my concept of psychological gerrymandering as it is to the other concept I'm working on in my book called structural stultification. Structural stultification is a term that I like to use for what Marx called the cretinization of the working class. What is the definition of cretin? It's like, you know, a stupid person, a person who is physically deformed and has a mental disability because of that's a more technical term from back in the day. But the basic point of what Marx is trying to get at with cretinization is basically to say that society, the way that it reduces everyone to mere labor on call for the interests and reproduction of capital, makes people stupid and mean. Well, okay, so it makes us stupid and mean, but it's more than just ignorance. Like, people make it out to be like it's just ignorance. It's just, oh well, we just don't have certain information. It's a lot worse than that. It's also that we're not able to work through our traumas, and that we will then reproduce those in society. It's also that without the conceptual means to understand and navigate the world that is increasingly complex, we feel not just alienated and precarious, but also impatient and exhausted just by hearing things we don't know that is like new information that challenges our preconceived notions of the way things are. And that these things are all part and parcel to structural stultification. And I think that the stuff that I've found in addition to how I'm thinking about structural stultification while approaching psychohistory, all of this cross-cultural analysis of the West, the East, the Global South, indigenous, whatever, ways of life, the fact that anthropologists and historians for the last 150 years have been kind of painting either this rosy picture that tries to make it out to be as though everybody was like, Rousseau would talk about noble savages, or the opposite, which is this exceptionalist, oh, we're the best, kind of as though we don't have these skeletons in our closet today, but also throughout history, is, well, it's very concerning. And this is where I'm going to start getting into the stuff about Tankies, because for me, Tanky does not just mean Stalin apologist, and that's why I wanted to do a whole video essay on this. People kind of just like, oh, well, as long as I'm critical of Stalin, then it's fine. and then you'll have Marxist-Leninists or Trotskyists or whatever basically say everything with the Soviet Union was fine up until Stalin essentially went back on certain things he had initially said and started saying socialism in one country, class collaboration with the bourgeoisie, this kind of doubling down on the stage theory of history in his Dialectical and Historical Materialism, a book that I've read 2.5 times this year, and I can tell you it's bad. It's bad. Stalin tries to come across as though he's a scientist. He calls all philosophy or anything that calls into question his approach metaphysics, and he hates metaphysics and metaphysicians, and just kind of says that they're just doing speculation, but what he's doing is science, and that dialectical and historical materialism, which is the super watered down, exaggerated version of something Marx had been doing, he takes it as of an absolute scientific truth, but it's about as scientific as Scientology, maybe less so. And that was sadly the version of Marxism that gets called traditional Marxism that spread throughout the world for at least 20 years, at the height of the USSR. And so when people say, "Oh, I'm not," Stalin was a bad man. The purges and the show trials and people being forced to lie, and people being sent to the gulag and constantly being disappeared. Like that's all unique to Stalin. We denounce Stalin, and then kind of just like, but Marxist Leninism though, that's fine. Well, Lenin paved the way in a lot of ways. I think. As though I am critical of Hannah Arendt, I think that she's onto something about how there are, and even Zizek says this, that there is certain things in Leninism that pave the way for Stalin, and that it's the kind of stuff that bourgeois revolutionaries in like the American Revolution, for instance, cared a great deal about. How do we keep things from going back to having a sort of autocracy? How do we keep things from going back to some kind of tyranny? How do we keep things, which obviously, the oligarchs have won in this country, but nevertheless, there was at least a lot of like a concerted effort to establish checks and balances and the ability to, when you're being treated unjustly, to be able to turn to a third party and be able to hold, is that with the kind of excuses that traditional Marxists tend to give Soviet Russia, it was a wartime, these are wartime exceptions, a lot of the sort of basis of how this society was structured remains not critically challenged. And I guess what I'm getting at is that for me, or for us, for anybody who's doing approaching politics from a more philosophical standpoint, to try to see what's good all around, and to try to understand what are the mistakes that have been made and how can we do better, and what is the hope for salvaging some kind of a forward-looking project that could actually bring some real emancipation. We have to take these things seriously, and that what I call the tanky tendency, after having been in multiple Marxist organizations this year, and having been surrounded by people who are Marxist-Leninists, Trotskyists, maybe Stalinists, definitely Maoists, ANCOMs, straight up anarchists, as well as more kind of general vague fusionist approaches, is that I have remained pretty unsatisfied by the general interpretive approach that a lot of people take to history, where it seems like they've taken a side for social reasons, or maybe they were convinced by something they read or something they came across, but now that they've taken a side, they're going back through history and they're basically towing some line or set of lines that are interpretive lines, that are ideologically motivated lines, that will often be very, very dogmatic. And so one of the big big things I see with this tendency that is not strictly relegated to, it's not limited to people who are doing Stalin apologetics or, making excuses for Stalin or whatever. It's like the tendency that I'm more worried about than, because the thing is like, I don't wholesale denounce Stalin. I don't, because I am genuinely curious in understanding what he thought, or at least what people at the time thought he thought, what he was trying to communicate, or how he was being interpreted. I'm more interested in understanding than I am in condemning. But there's this approach that, maybe you were in high school and you got this exceptionalist, triumphalist version of history, and you weren't really paying attention or doing it very critically, or maybe you were, and then you maybe read something like A People's History of the United States or Settlers or something like that. You read a book like that kind of gives the other side. And you go from being like, oh my God, I thought that we were the best. And then you're going, oh, now we're the worst. Well, I think that that's a problem. I think that if your approach was, I want to like write this out. Do I have a piece of paper here? Yeah. By the way, hi there in the chat. This is really interesting stuff. I want to keep listening. I've got an appointment. Okay, yeah. I probably won't be streaming because I do have to go in the next like half hour. But I hope you'll be able to watch the rest of it later and share your thoughts in the comment section below. Welcome, by the way, to Ryandy's. So I'm just going to go ahead and draw a line down the middle here on this piece of paper. I'm going to write good on one side and then evil on the other side. And then I'm going to write white on the good side. I'm going to write black on the evil side. And then I'm going to write man on the left side, and then I'm going to write woman on the other side. And then I'm going to do order on the one side, and I'm going to do chaos on the other side. And then I'm going to do truth on the good side, and then I'm going to do lies on the evil side. Okay, do you see what I'm doing? Okay, this is basic deconstruction, but developmentally, like we think it's very natural, I think, because we find it recurring everywhere, to kind of think in these sort of divisions. I can also do in-group on the left side, and then like other. I'll just do in-group versus other. In French theory, they always say other versus same, right? We have like this tendency as humans, it's very, very 5-year-old brained, to see everything as either good or evil, as either mine or others, to either winning or losing. It's like ultimatums, zero sum, either or, this way or that way. And a sort of way of growing out of that is to either learn that the one side that you thought was all the good stuff is wrong, and therefore to come to some kind of like maybe it's more complicated than I thought. And then there's two kind of ways that people will go. One is very relativist, right? To basically say, oh, well, who am I to judge? And, who can really know? And, truth and goodness are all basically relative. To then being like, the other way is to then just say, we're going to reverse the terms here. So let's just go ahead and say in group, well, what if it's just America? Okay. And then on the other side here, we'll put third world as an example. So America's good. America's exceptional. America is on the side of truth. And let's put justice down here. Justice versus oppression. Okay. If you've made these sort of primary identifications already, where it's just like all of these terms are kind of working on the same side, and the other terms are all working on the other side, either at an explicit level because you were taught like some serious, like explicitly white supremacist shit, or maybe it's more just kind of internalized and assumed because this is your standpoint, and so you've kind of internalized these biases. In either one of those cases, something that what I call the tanky tendency is to just take like one or two of the terms on the one side and to swap them. So instead of like coming up with a more multidimensional approach that seriously tries to approach things more critically and uses stronger criteria to evaluate and tries to get multiple sides of stories, it just assumes there really are just two sides engaged in a cosmic struggle between good and evil. And that instead of, let's just say that the person first finds out, oh, the world is, as I've grown up in it, extremely patriarchal. So swap these terms, oh, the future is women, but basically maintains the rest of this conceptual approach, the rest of this conceptual schema. Another way of doing it is to put oppression on the side of good and justice. So those who have been oppressed must be good. Those who've been oppressed must be truth-telling. Those who've been oppressed must just be on the right side. And then we're going to go ahead and swap the terms. America is the evil, the bad, the chaotic, warmongering, evil empire, which is, definitely a serious concern that I have. But what I'm saying is that, yes, this is how the culture war tends to go. The culture war tends to play within these kinds of dichotomies, but that maturity and being a responsible thinking person requires understanding that just because ideological movements that you're surrounded by or little in-groups that you're hanging out with might just be switching a few of these terms around doesn't give them a monopoly on truth. And it does seem like it's a reason I can't really spend much time online. I find it so frustrating. I see so much of it, and it's so dispiriting because real people are a lot more complicated, and reality is a lot more complicated. And so how then are we supposed to learn about the history of the world, or of the history of the left, for that matter? We can't just, go become Trotskyists, and then through Trotskyism we'll learn the critique of Stalinism, and there we go. Now we've got the correct kind of way of inheriting the Marxist project, right? Well, I mean, sure, you will definitely, if you go through such an education program, you will learn a lot about history that you would not have learned otherwise. Some of it's so ideologically motivated and will be super distorting that you will sometimes know less about certain things than you would have if you hadn't ever learned about them in the first place, right? Other times, it's just genuinely good information. But I guess as humans who are trying to learn from the past and approach the future in a responsible way, I think part of the solution is not putting, say, traditional Marxism on one side and putting anarchism on the other side, and then just assuming that liberals and anarchists in every situation were lying or wrong, and to not assume that your traditional Marxist approach was always true. That we have to take these things at a sort of case-by-case basis. And a problem with trying to do things in this case-by-case basis way is nobody has the time or energy for that. Nobody has the time for that. And it's very frustrating to live in a world where it's like we never have the time or energy to get to the bottom of things. But I would just say that, you don't have to have opinions on everything. You don't have to double down and take the side of whatever in-group you're a part of. And it's okay not to always know everything. And that is why I like the Platypus Affiliated Society. So that's the platypus is in the list of the title here. I said that this stream is about, first I talked about the scams that I've been scammed on. Then I'm talking about psychohistory, which I did. I talked a little bit about the tanky tendency, which is, so you can look up the term Manichaeism. Someone help me in the chat if you know how to say it properly. Manichaeism. It's kind of like, some people make it sound like Nietzscheanism, but it's Manichaeism. I don't know. But basically, it's the thinking about everything as a cosmic struggle between good and evil, where truth and light and man and all of these other kind of words are kind of on the one side, and then all of the other terms in those binaries are on the other side. That's kind of like what I'm calling the tanky tendency. It's like, it's so whether or not you're a Stalin apologist or not, like the real question is how, like, are you taking responsibility for the things that you know? Are you rushing into making knowledge claims instead of taking your sweet time to really look into things? And then, like I said, we get into the Platypus Affiliated Society, because the Platypus Affiliated Society is the only broad leftist organization that I've been able to find that has a sort of approach kind of like what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and like pull up their website right here, where they're basically they call themselves pre-political. Their kind of axiom is that the left, in terms of an organized working class with political power, is dead. Yes, there is a left in terms of the capitalist state in the U.S. That left, that would be the Democrats. There is that left, but in terms of the historical left, the left that has a historic mission to actually overcome capitalism. Yes, thank you, Ryandes. I actually don't know how to say Manichaeism, but you said it perfect. There you go. But just derailed myself with that comment. Yeah, they're the only approach that I've found that is kind of doing the educational thing that I always wanted. So what they will do is they have panels where they bring on avowed Marxists, avowed anarchists, avowed socialists, avowed like radical liberals, avowed like DSA people, Bolshevik people, like people that would probably get called Tankies. They even brought on Grover Furr, who's a total Stalinist. Like, they bring on all kinds of people, put them on these panels, and then ask them questions like, what is socialism? What is the left? What is the future of capitalism? And you can look them up on YouTube. You can look them up on their podcast. They're in both places. They're on any podcasting app, and they're on YouTube as well. This is not an endorsement of everything they say. That would be stupid. And anybody who was to endorse everything they said would be disgusting. Because, did that work? Could people hear the soundboard just now? It would be ridiculous to endorse everything they say, because they don't like assert a lot of positive lines or anything like that, because they're pre-political. Their main thing is being a place where leftists of every stripe are able to come together to confront their history, and in a way that is not sectarian. It's not committed to maintaining any traditional Marxist approach. Though I would say that it's more of a Marxists and various types of Marxists, or disillusioned, like post-Marxists, coming together to sort things out, more so than anarchists, though there are anarchists who are also there. Oh, it did work. Awesome. Yes. Glad that soundbite worked. So anyway, I'll read a couple of things from their About section. So the Platypus synthesis. And really quick, I'll just say that I've because a lot of their meetings went to Zoom, I spent the better part of the last month tuning into Platypus meetings for their discussion groups, and watching their panels and stuff like that in Chicago and in other cities, just to ask questions and kind of get a sense for what they're doing. They are in all these different cities and abroad, like so they're in Tokyo, Toronto, Vienna, Austin. They're in the Bay Area. They're in Berlin. Anyway, so the Platypus synthesis, history, theory, and practice. Introducing Platypus. Actually, maybe this is not the best place to read this. These are all a bunch of articles. I'm just going to go ahead and share this and recommend that you look up these articles yourself. And then I'm trying to find the real About section. I feel like this is not what I was looking for. Let's see. Maybe if I erase that part of the URL and go back. I think that like this kind of like I think that it would not hurt to join any leftist organization, no matter what their tendency is, to learn everything that they have to teach you, but just kind of maintain an open mind while you're doing it, and at the same time stay somewhat critical and, you know, have questions for them, but also, you know, have those questions for a group like Platypus if you were to get involved with Platypus later, so that you can just realize that you're never done, right? So right here it says, a playground of free expression. Oh no, this is an article. This is not what I'm looking for. Why does it say that this is what they're about? Oh, here we go. Statement of purpose. Yeah, let's read that. That's what I was looking for. Sorry, the website's looking different than what I'm used to. I'm going to blame that. Also, it says that they're in Pocatello. That's not true. That chapter never really took off. Wow. I hope that my internet's really not this bad. Is anyone even there yet? Or still?
It's pure ideology.
Platypus is a project for the self-criticism, self-education, and ultimately the practical reconstitution of a Marxian left. At present, the Marxist left appears as a historical ruin. The received wisdom of today dictates that past failed attempts at emancipation stand not as moments full of potential yet to be redeemed, but rather as what was. Utopianism that was bound to end in tragedy. As critical inheritors of a vanquished tradition, Platypus contends that after the failure of the 1960s New Left and the dismantlement of the welfare state and the destruction of the Soviet Union in the 1980s through 90s, the present disorientation of the left means we can hardly claim to know the tasks and goals of social emancipation better than the utopians of the past did. Our task is critique and education towards the reconstitution of a Marxian left. Platypus contends that the ruin of the Marxist left as it stands today is of a tradition whose defeat was largely self-inflicted, which that's a very controversial statement, but we'll go on. Hence, at present, the Marxist left is historical and in such a grave state of decomposition that it has become exceedingly difficult to draft coherently programmatic social political demands. In the face of the catastrophic past and present, the first task for the reconstitution of a Marxian left as an emancipatory force is to recognize the reasons for the historical failure of Marxism and to clarify the necessity of a Marxian left for the present and future. If the left is to change the world, it must first transform itself. It goes on and on. You get the basic gist, I hope. I hope that makes sense for everybody. They have a syllabus for their reading groups. They've got reading groups in all these different cities that you can get involved with, especially with COVID. A lot of them meet through Zoom. I'm not going to really push you to do it, but I'm just going to say that I am in a place of researching all of this in kind of new ways, asking lots of questions along the way. I'm still in multiple leftist organizations. This is just one of them that I think really gets at some of the things that I think are needed and important. And so in terms of like you, the viewer, if you're too busy in life, of course you probably are, just be advised, I am myself going through this process of trying to understand and learn from the past and taking these various critical approaches to history, psychohistory, the sort of platypus, like hearing out the different tendencies and their interpretations of things. And I found out about Platypus because I read Time, Labor, and Social Domination. And Time, Labor, and Social Domination by Moishe Piston is a fantastic book. One of the excerpts on my channel on YouTube, it's called Abstract Domination. It's from that book. And then I actually did an exegesis video where I unpack and explain that excerpt. And in that unpacking and explanation, maybe I mentioned Platypus, maybe I did not. But basically, Platypus was founded by students of Moishe Piston. So what Time, Labor, and Social Domination is it's a critical theoretical reinterpretation of Marxist theory that radically calls into question the ways that what gets called traditional or orthodox Marxism inherited, appropriated, watered down, bastardized that project, and the ways that opportunism and historical necessity kind of took it on this other course for what it's kind of known as in the 20th century. So I'm also at the same time doing a sort of history of populism. Populism and the left have always had an interesting relationship. So there's a bunch of different authors I'm reading there. I'm very far from having any kind of opinions on anything related to all of that. I just kind of wanted to give that general update. And then to finally wrap it up by saying that metamodernism, it's just, I meet these people, they fucking get it. I'm like, wow. And then they're always like, you got to read the Listening Society. And I'm always like, what? So there's just certain people online and in real life and philosophy clubs and stuff like that who I've met who, like, they always seemed a couple of steps ahead of everybody else, including myself. Like, they had come to some realization that I was just coming to myself. And then it turned out that they had read the Listening Society and they would recommend it. And so the Listening Society is by some pseudonym, some fake author. I don't know who, Heinze something. And metamodernism proposes like a new way. And it's not social democracy. It's not revolutionary Marxism. It's not utopian. It's not anarcho-syndicalism. It's not necessarily dedicated to being leftist. It tries to say that all of those terms had their historical place. The time in this digital age is for something new. This book proposes that it's getting at things in this new way. And I am halfway through it. I've just been reading it I've been listening to it over the last, like 24 hours. Actually, right here, listen.
My suggestion for understanding these examples is that they have developed
that book right there that we were just listening to. Yeah, I've been recording the robot reader using Audacity so I can make my own MP3s so that I can listen while working without having to worry about buffering or internet connectivity while I'm on the job. And so I've been recording all these different books for my literature review and then uploading them to my phone, and it's great. But the basic point is I'm halfway through, and so many of the things in the Listening Society are stuff that I've come to similar conclusions through my own sort of approach. And I think that the sort of deadlocks that I am perceiving through psychohistory, through Platypus, and through these other approaches, the sort of deadlocks on the left that the left has been kind of mired in now for the last, since the end of World War II. It's all stuff that, accelerationists, they see a little bit of the critique. You get these other people that see a little bit of the critique is coming from everywhere. What I'm doing is I'm kind of bundling it and saying, okay, so what's the salvageable aspects and what's really worth maintaining here, and what are new strategies and ways towards organizing and moving into the future that actually have potential of not just repeating the past and its fucking chaotic horror and barbaric, bloodshed and all of the ecocide and absolute destruction that would come with a third world war if we were to seriously push for one right now. Swole, fuck you. Swolitariat coming in here. I'm just kidding. Love you, man. You go back and fast forward your way through everything I'm doing here. I will say, though, that one of the books that I'm reading is it's a very good Marxist book, and Swolitariat just kept pushing it, and that's actually why I'm working on it. I'm actually re-listening to it. It's called Socialism or Extinction by Ted Reese. It's definitely good. I'm not sure that he's right about his solutions, but his diagnosis of the situation is good. He's good. Yeah, hey, socialism with American characteristics. That's what we need. Yeah. Well, how about socialism that doesn't embrace autocracy and throw out the baby with the bathwater when it comes to bourgeois values? Eh? What about maintaining certain aspects of the bourgeois revolution that, those liberal freedoms that, sure, like they're not sufficient for actual liberation because they're formal freedoms and not substantive freedoms. But nevertheless, like it would be like living in hell not to have them, right? Not to have checks and balances and recourse to third parties, right? Like, it's like, we talked about the People's History approach. Yeah, those are books you couldn't write in other countries. Okay, you can be critical of other countries, but you can't be that critical. Okay, I've been to other countries where people had to whisper when they talked about politics. Okay, the ability to be able to be a stupid American that says I'm entitled to my opinion and then spouts a bunch of bullshit. That is, in a sort of way, a privilege, and it's a right that we did have to fight for. And the idea that traditional societies with their monarchies and their divine right of kings and their privileges are given by the king and all of that kind of stuff is just like, yeah, I'm not a fan. Like there are aspects of bourgeois revolution that are definitely not worth throwing out. It's like, hey, just because we don't like the bourgeoisie doesn't mean we throw out everything that came with bourgeois revolution. That's not dialectical. Okay, that's not dialectical at all. And there's a lot of opportunistic sort of national liberation styled Pol Pot like movements in the 20th century that called themselves Marxist that were kind of just saying that opportunistically because they wanted help from certain political allies or potential allies, or they thought that would give them a sort of intellectual upper hand, but in reality their shit had nothing to do with what really matters in the critique of political economy and scientific socialism. Recapturing our radical imagination and trying to figure out the road from here to there. Absolutely. Oh, I missed part of what Swole said before it went behind the screen here. Let's move that. Yeah, on the solution side, or at least the organization, form, and strategy side. Can you say the name of that book again? The last one I mentioned? By Ted Reese? It's called Socialism or Extinction. So yeah, a really quick rundown on all the books that I was talking about on this stream. I think The Listening Society is one that everyone should be reading, but I do think that Ted Reese has an amazing analysis of the planetary situation and its stakes right now in socialism or extinction. And there's really cool stuff about automation and hemp in there as well, like Swolitariat was referencing. I'm less certain about saying that, just trying to do Soviets everywhere, factory councils, etc., is necessarily the solution. I'm a little hesitant about that for a variety of reasons we can't even get into right now because I'm trying to close out the stream. But the other books I mentioned, The Emotional Life of Nations, History of Childhood, and The Origins of War and Child Abuse. Those three books by Lloyd Demas. I'll type his name in chat just so that you all have that. And then here, Lloyd Demas. And he's got a lot of articles on his website that you can just read for free. So Read his one about the Holocaust. Read his one about incest. What I'll say about incest, just really quick, is there's this sort of Western idea, kind of comes from Freud, and Freud's, it's not Freud's fault, it's just like what everybody at the time thought, and that's that the one thing that ties all the societies together is the incest prohibition. And Lloyd Demas kind of leads off the essay by being like, funny how no one ever cites where they get that from, and that every time ethnologists are reporting back on any society that they're going out and studying, it's actually the opposite. That you actually find out that it's very normalized. Like people talk a lot of shit about Gandhi and the kinds of weird shit that was going on in his bedroom. But let's just say that that was very normal for his time and place. And that I'm not doing apologetics when I say that it's normal. Most people just kind of avoid it because they don't know how to say that something's fucking, like, potentially super traumatic for people. They don't know how to say that in a way that won't come off as Eurocentric, or so they just kind of revert to like a sort of cultural relativism. But when you start pulling cultural relativism for pedophilia or incest, like, or, you know, child abuse, what you're doing is the same shit that people who do apologetics for pedophilia are doing. So you got to think about that. It's kind of a hard bind to be. We don't want to be cultural imperialists, but we do want to take the sides of people throughout history who have tried to run away or escape that kind of upbringing, because that same shit happens today. There is not a monolithic culture where we're all pure and that stuff doesn't happen anymore here in the United States, for instance. That stuff still happens here in the United States, and people who want to preserve traditional ways of existence here in the United States can often be reproducing a lot of that terror and trauma themselves. So the Aboriginal text, that was a passage where Lloyd Demas was citing somebody, and the bit about eating, you know, baby hunger and all of that. That was, I shared it in the stream earlier. Let me grab that link again. It's right here. Here, I'll just share it again. It's an article called Psychohistory on writing childhood history. It's a sort of defense that Lloyd Demas he's defending himself while critiquing other historians, because basically he got super canceled by academia, as you can imagine, for writing about this stuff. And so he's explaining like the kinds of crazy stuff that he's been up against trying to write about these things. And so it's a good article right there, and it talks about the stuff that I was referencing. Yeah. It's not unique to Aborigines. It turns out that superstition, although I don't like scientism, and I think scientism can become its own superstition, like the kind of superstition that sees demons and angels and hears voices and all of this stuff in everything all the time. And it has like this tendency to also come along with a lot of, and this is stuff I'm learning through Demas, is like it comes with, like, we talk about rape culture. You wanna see some fucking rape? God damn, it's terrifying. Like this stuff, like superstitious, really superstitious, paranoid societies where like I've already talked enough about it. I can't go into any more details, but let me just say that it's not limited to Aborigines. This shit is like, it's just like humans, insofar as they give in to superstition and are kind of structurally stultified by their culture and deprived of the means towards their own mental or conscious liberation, towards clarity and understanding about like the world. It results in all kinds of really fucked up stuff, and or at least it feeds into it. And the thing is that those people and those ideologies or superstitions or whatever, those don't come out of a vacuum. Those come out of people who've themselves been fucked up, right? That's the thing, is like behind every bully, behind every like one of these parents that you'll read about, you have to remember that like they themselves were probably like really fucked up. And that's not an excuse. That doesn't let anyone off the hook. But I'm not moralizing so much as saying I don't like these approaches to history that try to like make sides and then make one side out to be angels and the other side out to be demons. It's like, no, humans have this fucking, we're coming out of like this past where babies were treated, where they had hot coals thrown on them because they were crying, or where they had to eat their siblings because of ritual superstitious practices and, you know, that kind of stuff. You know, gang rape being normalized, and then called by these anthropologists who are reporting on it, it being called, oh, they're sexually free and unrepressed. Unless you're the children who are trying to escape that because it's obviously not so unrepressive and freeing for you. What about superstition in favor of life? That's a good question. Go ahead and please expand in the YouTube comment section on that, on what you mean by that. Ask a question there. Mr. Red says, yes, that kind of nonsense. Go figure with the month of Halloween and all. Oh my God. Yeah, totally. Oh, and Sushi Desires earlier on the Twitch chat had said that their best guess was Manichaeism. Manichaeism? That might be it. I've heard it being like Manichaeism or something like that. And it's like, here, hold on. Let's leave on a more positive note. Let's ask YouTube how to pronounce it. I know someone spelled it out earlier, so let me try to see if I can pull that up. Yeah, Ryandy's. Pronounce. Oh, it's muted.
Theism. Manichaeism.
Manichaeism. This is a robot voice. I can't trust it.
Manichaeism.
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 Manichaeism. That sounds a little bit more plausible. Anyway, for those who missed it, go back, watch that part where I was talking about this sort of binary reductivist essentializing permanently infantile approach to thinking about cultures and history and stuff like that. And just ultimately what we're trying to get at is there's a lot more complexity, and we have to be a little bit more responsible as I'm not saying as the left. I'm saying as individuals who are trying to understand what is right and what is wrong, and trying to take responsibility for the things that we believe, or the things that we propagate, or the things that we do. Okay, just as the philosophers that you and I are, like, as we approach the complexity of life, these are just things to think about. Anyway, much love. Thanks for joining, everybody. I'm gonna cut this thing off before 2 hours. Thank you so much. Yeah, I also think it's a second pronunciation. Take care, everybody.